the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas,
14th century,
not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery, Nash, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New.
Well, hold on, because
you can't just do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. What it is, what it ain't, it's your boy Carlton with another video for anything, everything, where I talk about anything I want and everything that comes to my mind. Today's video, we're going over the complete obliteration of Billy Carson. Oh, what a day, what a day, what a joyous day the Lord has made. Okay, let me not do all that. Okay, but if you guys don't know, there is a biblical scholar or ancient text scholar, Wes Huff, who's debating Billy Carson, who pushes a lot of like a Kemetic and Egyptian this and God is within me and telekinesis and all the other crap that pushes a lot of dogma like that. Right now they're going over, I guess, more accurate versions of the text, or what really actually happened historically, and what documents do we have, these copies of other ancient texts or religious texts or whatever the case may be, and they're just going back and forth with that. And if you guys don't know, it's been going all over online, and I mean all over online, of Billy Carson just being refuted on almost every single claim he makes, on almost everything. I'm just not watching the 2-hour video. I'm not gonna do the whole 2 hours. I'll probably do like 20 minutes per video and chop it up like that. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it.
Wes, we got you back on. So I'll introduce Wes too, but yeah, what I was just saying real quick, Billy, too, is I also a shared belief, I think, too, with you, with God, is I also believe, I know God is within me too. Mm-hmm. It's just, and I don't believe that it's like you have to do 20 circles.
Is it just me, or Wes look like an animated character? Look how he's smirking, listening to the garbage coming out of his mouth.
In the sand and like do a ritual to.
Yeah.
that was through like my connection with Jesus, where I know throughout my life that's been my, when things are tough, it's like the strength of God is literally within me.
You see, I don't want to pause it too much, but here's what I will say. You come to realize that people can say a whole bunch of stuff that sounds smart until you ask them to explain it. Until you make them really go deep into exactly what they mean. What do they mean? What are you trying to convey? What are you trying to say? When you say the word God, who or what are you referring to? Is this something tangible? Can we see it? Can we test it? Can we speak to them? Like, you're saying this God is within you. Is this God also within me? To some people, you feel me? So like when you really start to dissect claims that people make, you come to realize that like, everyone sounds smart until whatever they say is tested, right? And Billy, the reason he's able to get such a big following, even though he's spreading a lot of misinformation, is because of how confident he says things, right? So even with what's the word I'm looking for? With anybody, whether it's someone that you agree with or you disagree with, start testing everything. And even people that's watching me, anything that I say, test it. Do your own research. Find the people that agree with me, find the people that disagree with me, and then go from there.
So like where we do agree on, where like a lot of the heresies and stuff through over religious practices would be like, no, you have to come through the head of this church to be blah blah blah, right. And personally, and we're about to get Wes on, so we can have two really smart people in this talk about it, but I'm just breaking it down to my level of my understanding. That's been what really drew me in, is kind of when Jesus came and flipped all that on its head and was like, no, we're not, what was it, like the Pharisees, like what were the hype? He's like, we're not having to go through all the rules. He's like, they're actually worse. But I'm a linguist, biblical scholar, PhD and athlete wannabe. I like how you threw that in the bio right there. And Wesley, my man, I think it would be great to. I know you guys were both recently in Egypt. There's tons that I'm interested in that. How all these things show up in Egypt is baffling to me. But just going right to it, I had here, Billy, you talk about how Jesus was never crucified, which is interesting because my wife, who's a Muslim, their beliefs, from what I understand from her, are they don't think that Jesus, as they believe is a prophet, God would have him killed. But I don't think they have any historical evidence, as far as I know, as to what or how or why they believe that. I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about, like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. And that Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible, and the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which according to some scholars, is a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally.
So it's a hypothesis. It's not something that you really have evidence for. And he's quoting a whole bunch of texts, and he's not, I doubt he's going to tell you how we know these texts to be valid, or not even valid, but have any type of basis. And then I really want to know the scholars that he's referring to that, talking about this book about Jesus, his wife. Because if they're considered scholars, then yeah, might have to take their degrees away from them.
Believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our consciousness, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
And Wes, I'm gonna let you respond to that. And again, I mean, this is everyone listening to the show. I'm always like, challenge everything. Learn to critically think and continue to come to your conclusions. Even with Jesus, I'm not personally even waiting on that he has to come back. I already know so you don't have next level. Go ahead on for what Billy was talking about, I think with a book in the Harvard Museum, and I heard something about Jesus's wife, which yeah.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you, because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt. But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain. that they're referencing there, but they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Okay. King James Version came out 1611. These events happened 2,000 years ago. How before the King James Bible, version did the Sinai Bible come out? And what text did the Sinai Bible have that that they translated it into? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think they had the Gutenberg Bible, and also we know that the New Testament was written in Greek, Aramaic. What else? I know the Old Testament is Hebrew. I'm getting the brain fart right now. But all I'm asking is, when it comes to the Sinai Bible, what text were they using to translate it? That's all I'm asking.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office.
So I have the proof.
And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. Mm-hmm. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring, when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there, I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, mm-hmm. where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19.
So you mean to tell me he came using some, hidden knowledge, which is what his name is. He came talking about a Sinai Bible, which is something a lot of people aren't familiar with. And he's trying to say, well, this Sinai Bible does not record the crucifixion. And he comes and he says, well, if you're referring to the Codex Sinaiticus, it's like word for word what we already have. So can you tell me, like, where exactly is it not confirming the crucifixion of Jesus? Let's see what he says.
Or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers or listeners or whatever be able to see that?
Right now to make sure I have the version that I'm looking at.
While he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying to all the people that aren't scientists traveling the world and linguists, I don't even know how to pronounce it the right way. Like me,
linguists,
insufferable.
What cyanide? I keep thinking of cyanide, like the poet Sinai Bible. So
right.
Is that like a version? So from my own knowledge that I know, like when I really studied all this, what I thought was interesting about the Bible was how many different eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day. How many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were. And they went on purpose to mention so many other names that they were able to cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times, from my understanding. And those were different things that I always thought were kind of interesting that I felt was a good concept of proof.
I want to know what Billy's saying, man.
Where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are 2 manuscripts.
Hold up. So originally he quotes the Sinai Bible, which is literally the exact same thing that we already have. And now he's talking about a Gnostic gospel called the Gospel of Barnabas. So you're just taking work of fiction and using it as facts. There's a way historical documents are verified. And you mean to tell me you was able to read the Gospel of Barnabas, but not the criticisms that the scholars that you follow, but you weren't able to see the criticisms that they had for the Gospel of Barnabas? What a joke.
The Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery. And so that's why I think it's important to get
Known.
sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of,
Two
one is in
copies.
Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words.
Wow.
And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen. Right
That's
here.
amazing.
This is, an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it
Is that the
has the
papyrus by
crucifixion.
any chance?
Yeah,
That's
so
great idea.
papyrus is just the what it's made out of. So
I got that from ChatGPT, by the way.
yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys, I'm just
I
trying
can
to sound
actually
smart for a second.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
yeah, so I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorized.
So what he did there was essentially demonstrate how exactly it was going on, in the 1st century when the other scribes were doing the exact same thing, which is why we have so many copies when it comes to Greek, when it comes to Hebrew manuscripts, well, especially Greek. I think Greek is probably like the biggest amount of manuscripts that we have, considering the New Testament. And one thing that you guys need to understand is these copies actually helps the claim of knowing that what was originally written, this is what it was saying, right? So I'm not coming to the conclusion that just because we have copies that means it's true. But what I am saying is it can give us the confidence to know that whoever originally wrote this, we can know that this is what he originally wrote because of how many copies we have. So when you have so many copies and you're able to compare different manuscripts, and you're able to because you can see the mistakes that people make because you're able to compare it to every other copy. So now, since you can see the mistakes that people make, you will know when someone try to slip in a forgery or whatever the case may be, because it doesn't match up with the mass production of the copies that we already have. And literally what he did when he said he was in University of Philadelphia, there was people that devoted their life work to just writing it down, copies. And this, you feel me, went on for centuries. This is not something that only biblical people did. This was something that was going on, in the Middle Ages. This is something that was going on in UK during the Vikings era and all this other stuff, while they was writing down the history and things like that.
Systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Alland categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf, which includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas,
14th century,
not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery, an expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because...
You can't just do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. How you come out here quoting known forgeries and you just try to bypass it like you ain't just say what you just said. Like you ain't just said what you just said. We have documents dating to the 2nd and 3rd century that records the crucifixion. You come talk about a known forgery that dates back to the earliest source, the 14th century, but we're supposed to take that serious. And now when the expert tells you like, hey, like, yeah, nah, you tweaking, you crazy. All right, let's go into the Old Testament. Man, bye.
Do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name?
Yeah,
I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear, and there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So
let me get this straight. So they have papyrus that dates back to the 4th century, which means they used papyrus that was already old but not written on, but they used it and copied it off of a PDF file.
We know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because...
So the person that backed it up came out and admitted, okay, yeah, I was tweaking this fake.
We can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text of that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately...
Boom. And just so you guys know, that was not me that had the little... That was them. Their connection is a little messed up. As you can see, his camera been looping for quite some time. Or not just looping, but, you know, dropping signal, bad signal, whatever the case may be. But essentially what I want to say, I want to end it here before I break it down, because I'm not going to lie, he's getting cooked. This guy didn't say one thing factual yet. Whenever you have something and, you know, they're looking at it and they're scrutinizing and they're critiquing it heavily, that's how they're able to see that, okay, this is how we know this person copied it off a PDF file, because you copied the mistakes, which is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that how copies of copies reveal the credibility of whatever document you're reviewing. So if you're even copying the mistakes and you can see the original document that has the same wording and that has the same mistake, you're like, okay, this is where he got it from. And it's the same thing in school, right? Whenever you're cheating off of someone, you know, this is how you know they cheated, because they got the same wrong answers and they got the same right answers, right? But yes, I want to stop it here. I want to do a separate video for the other parts. So like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think about what they originally spoke about in this video. And if, you know, whatever you have, if you have any other, you know, conflicting historical evidence or sources. But if you're one of those delusional atheists that, you know, trying to be the main character and like, oh, you're arguing about fictional things anyway, we don't really care to hear that. I'm just letting you know. But thank you for tuning in. See you next time on Anything Everything. Peace.